right, welcome everybody to the Fall PD series. This is the last of our Fall PD series, and it's the rescheduled Family and Community Engagement web series. Right? You can go to hashtag NCELS, and you can follow on the bit.ly there at the bit.ly/20 Fall PD series. My name is Marshall Foster, and I'm going to be one of your presenters today. I said welcome, and we hope this is informative. So for the Fall PD series reminder, the session recordings and materials are going to be at that bit.ly that you see there, the bit.ly/20 Fall PD series, just like that. And for your social media, you can use that hashtag NCLs on social media. So that way you can let everybody know about any of the PD series that you find informative. This particular webinar is the Growing Success for ELS Family and Community Engagement. Like I said, originally it was slated for September 29th, and we had to reschedule it till today. So thank you for joining us today. On the agenda, we're going to have, we did the welcome, we're about to do some polls, and then we'll get into the family and community engagement. We'll go into the definition and the federal requirements under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, Title I and III of ESSA, cover some other areas with the language instruction educational program and some effective activities and strategies, as well as questions and wrap up. And I'll turn it over to Sally real quick.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Very quickly, we're going to use WebEx. You have the chat option in the controls. You should see the panel. And if you want to send a message to all of us, just select everyone or all attendees so we can quickly respond to any questions that you have, or if you need any links that we are sharing during the presentation. And we have a couple of polls today. We're going to use Mentimeter. Mentimeter is a free tool that we love using because we don't collect any personal information, and you can use either your computer or your smartphone. And we usually do it on the smartphone, so you don't have to get off the presentation. And if you type, I see Marshall has moved to the first poll. The first poll, if you type menti.com in your device and enter this code, we are going to be able to participate. And we want to know who has joined us today. Are you an ESL teacher, an MEP, Migrant Education Program staff, content area teacher, school administrator, or other? And if you can access and you select other, please type in the chat and let us know what is your role in your district. So Marshall, if we can click, Rachel has added a link to Menti and the code in the chat, so you can see and go and vote. And we have 9 votes so far, so we're gonna wait a few seconds and see if we get more votes enter. We usually do this because we want to know who is joining us, and then based on this, we give you a little more information, or we switch some of the resources that we are sharing during the day. So whenever you are ready, Marshall, I see 9 participants. So if you can make sure that you have selected an option and participating as well. Okay. So maybe, I think we need to refresh, Marshall. If you could refresh, maybe we can see a little more. There you go. Oh, nope. Don't listen to me. Okay, no idea. Oh, uh-oh.
Yeah, no, where'd that go? Odd.
There you go. Don't listen to me. Don't refresh the polls. So I was able to see we had a lot of participation from ESL teachers. Remember, we said during this PD, there you go. Thank you, Marshall. We said if you attend one of our sessions, we would love for you to invite one of your content area teachers or administrators, and this is the way you're helping us build capacity in your school districts. And I see in the chat, somebody said she's an administrator, so thank you for joining us. And we're going to select the second poll and move quickly so Marshall and Rachel can share all the great information that they have today. And we have the second poll and last poll of today is use one word or phrase to define family and community engagement. So we are going to do the same, use our device and go to Menti. I know Rachel is helping us with the code. And if you can see it on the screen, then you have it in the chat. And the number is 9668813. And if you select, enter one word or a phrase, what is family and community engagement for you? Okay, if we can click on the link, Marshall, and see what answers we have had so far. Okay, we have a lot of collaboration. So family and community engagement, it's a lot of collaboration. We see communication, building relationships, commitment, trust. It's something that is important, is impactful. Okay, so we have, I think we can continue, Marshall, so we don't spend any more time on this. And thank you very much for sharing. And we see, if we go to the next slide, I think we are all connected. We are on the same page. We think that communication is one of those important words that should always be in place when we're thinking about family and community engagement and collaboration. And that's part of building relationships and the outreach. How do you go and talk to the families and help them be welcome and get all the information they need, but also participate? And that's something that we have seen this transition in how we used to involve our families, just give them the information they needed in the language they needed. But now, besides doing this, we want to give them a specific active role in the school districts. We want them to be part of the decisions. We want them to be welcome and also participate openly in all what we're doing in the schools for our students. So we're going to learn what the federal and state guidance is to find this transition between involvement and engagement and how we can generate communication, collaboration, and build those relationships. So I invite Marshall, and thank you for participating in the polls.
Thank you, Sadly. Yeah, today we've had quite a few family and community engagement webinars and series this past year, and a lot of those covered some very specific and local activities and actual strategies and activities that you can actually do at the local level. Today's is going to focus more on the legal requirements, the compliance, things that you can use as leverage if you're trying to either get something done or you're in the process or you want to continue that. And, you know, where does it come from, right? And so the foundation of that is our Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Equal Educational Opportunities Act. And as you can see there, that it said 40 years ago, the Supreme Court, you know, stated that they needed to comply with their legal obligations under Title VI. And they must take affirmative steps to ensure that students with limited English proficiency can meaningfully participate in their educational programs and services, right? And so that's for the public schools. That same year, Congress enacted the EEOA, which affirmed that public schools and state education agencies, or SEAs, must act to overcome language barriers that impede equal participation by students in their instructional programs. So you can see this is where we get a lot of our information when we talk about identifying students, providing access to students, communication with parents, communication with students, and all those kinds of things. And so a lot of that really is founded in this Title VI of the 64 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 EEOA. All right, ensuring meaningful communication with limited English proficient parents. So this says school districts and SEAs have an obligation to ensure meaningful communication with LEP parents in a language they can understand and to adequately notify LEP parents of information about any program, service, or activity of a school district or SEA that is called to the attention of non-LEP parents. And so two quick things here. You'll notice that it says limited English proficient, and I know some people out there may be saying, well, we don't really use limited English proficient. Well, the federal government still does when it concerns adults or the parents. When they changed the language from LP to English learner when it came to the actual student. And so in the legislation, you'll see where it'll say the English learner when it refers to the student, but they still use LEP when it comes to the parents. So kind of an interesting distinction in that regard. And then, of course, this obviously shows you where we get the information when we have conversations or when we say that anything that is provided to a non-LEP parent must also be provided to the LEP parents, right? So that's where your translation and your interpretation comes from. All right, so this gives you kind of a quick rundown of where you can find a lot of these things that we're going to bring up today. The T1 stands for Title I. The T3 is Title III. And so where you can find these within Title I and Title III. One real quick note that one of the major differences between Title I and Title III as far as compliance is that Title I drives down to the school level. And so these are things that the school either needs to do or needs to show, or it's a requirement or obligation they may have. Whereas Title III is a district requirement, right? And so that's the difference between the two. Any kind of obligation falls on the district and not an individual school, because Title III money doesn't go down to individual schools. It only goes to the district, which then disseminates it out, right? Whereas Title I goes specifically to the schools. And so you can see there that we have, of course, 1112 is the major one for English learners and the language instruction. That's in the Parents' Right to Know section under 1112E. And we'll go into that, and then the notice and format. Then we'll get into Title I Part C, migrant parent. And then Title III gets into your required subgrantee activities, authorized activities, and then we get into immigrant children and youth, and then your local plans, which is your Title III application. And like I said, all of these are there to provide you with the information, the source, the citation, in which to then leverage to get the things done that you need to in your district or in your educational entity. And so the first one I have here is under ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the reauthorization of ESEA, is your Title I in the 1112E, and this is the part of the language instruction, and it's the parent notification letters. This is something that used to be under Title III, under No Child Left Behind, and it has to do with when you either initially identify a student as an EL student or annually as a continuation letter, right? And so with the reauthorization in DSSA, they moved this parent notification piece from Title III and into Title I. And so this is now a Title I requirement. And this is for your English learners. And so as you see, Part A says no later than 30 days after the beginning of the school year is when you have to notify anyone who was identified prior. So either in the summer or in the prior year. And so this is your continuation letter, right? And then B, during the first 2 weeks of being identified during the school year. So this is your 14-day window letter for those that are initially identified. Now, you could put the initial identified within that Part A as well if they come in at the beginning of the school year. But Part B is specifically for all those students who come in and are initially identified during the school year. All right, continuing on with this 1112E, just one section below that is a very important part that doesn't get a lot of attention, and this is the one, parental participation. And I've underlined a couple of very important parts here for you because, like I said, people don't realize this, but it says each local education agency receiving funds under this part shall implement an effective means of outreach to parents of English learners right? And then to inform the parents regarding how the parents can be involved, how they can be active participants, to do the various things listed there. And then what's important about the underlined parts is that this is one of the few parts in ESSA regarding English learners and LEP parents where they actually lay out in specific terms what something means. And so you see that part 2 where it says regular meetings. And it says that implementing an effective means of outreach to parents under the previous clause shall include holding and sending notice of opportunities for regular meetings for the purpose of formulating and responding to recommendations from parents of students assisted under this part, meaning English learners, right? And so that's an important part to remember, that they're saying that the school shall implement effective means of outreach. And what that means is that you're going to hold and send notice of opportunities for regular meetings and things like that in order to get feedback, from the parents on basically a variety of things. And what I'll do is I'll show here in a little bit how you can parlay that into what you're doing in the Title III application. All right. The next part is the very next paragraph from that 1112, and this is the important aspect as well, under notice and format. And it says the notice and information provided to parents under the previous sections, right, shall be in an understandable and uniform format, and to the extent practicable, provided in a language that the parents can understand. And so that extent practicable is an important part, because what it means is that if the overwhelming majority of your population speaks a certain language, then it should be something that should be translated, and you provide interpretation for. Now, if you have one student that speaks a language, it's probably not practicable to translate everything into that additional language, right, for the one student or for the one family. So that's the reason why they put that to the extent practicable. Some states have gone under consent decrees with the Department of Justice and with the Office of Civil Rights, where they have consented to translate things into, say, the top 3 languages, the top 5 languages, depending on the context of their geographic area and what languages are in their area. So it gives you a couple of ideas of what that means. All right, now we're moving on to Title III. In the ESSA requirements here under 3115, that any entity, right, getting the Title III funds shall provide and implement other effective activities and strategies that enhance or supplement the LIEP, which shall include parent, family, and community engagement activities. Now, if you're not familiar with the LIEP, that's the Language Instruction Educational Program, which lays out the context of your educational environment, the criteria of the students, and then services that you'll provide based on that criteria, right? And so this is saying that you're going to use the funds to provide and implement other effective activities that are going to enhance or supplement that LIP, and that part of those effective activities and strategies shall include parent, family, and community engagement activities. So that's another thing that you can look at when you're planning to meet the needs of our ELs and their families. All right, the next one is 3115E, and I put PRC 111. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what PRC is, that's actually the finance term that's used for the funding source, right? And so Title III is broken down into 2 funding sources, and the PRC 111 that you see is for immigrant children and youth, all right? The other one, which is for your English learners, is PRC 104. And those are the 2 PRCs, and PRC stands for Program Report Code. And like I said, you'll see that your finance officer will be very familiar with it, and you'll see it in a lot of budgets, and you'll see it in what they call the chart of accounts. And so anyway, I'm just letting you know that this means if you're receiving those funds, if you qualify and receive funds for immigrant children and youth, then there's also a clause in there about utilizing the money. And it says you shall use the funds, and then it says which may include, right? So it means you have to use the funds for something, right? And here are some things that you may include when you use those funds, right? And it says family literacy, parent and family outreach, and training activities designed to assist parents and families to become active participants in the education of their children. So once again, another funding source that could be used to help supplement, your overall goal of reaching and meeting the needs of your English learner and immigrant families. All right. So here I have authorized activities. All right. And so what authorized means is that it's not required that you do this thing in a specific way, but that you have the money and it's something that it's an allowable activity to do with this money. And the reason why they list this is because, like most other federal funds, the funds need to be used to supplement what you're doing at the district level, right? And so once again, it says any eligible entity receiving these funds, may use them to do the following things. And Part 6 says providing community participation programs, family literacy services, and parent and family outreach and training activities to English learners and their families to improve the English language skills of English learners and to assist parents and families in helping their children to improve their academic achievement and becoming active participants in the education of their children. And so you can see how this could be important, for example, in our remote learning that we're currently in, helping them to better understand that and how to better meet the needs of their children, right? You can also see how this is a redundancy that they build in so that you understand that it's not just one title. You can see similar language in Title I. You can see it with immigrant children and youth, and you see it here. So that way, like I said, there's a redundancy there to help ensure that you see the importance of family and community engagement. All right. Now I'm going to move into what they call local plans. And what a local plan is it's the application for the funds, right? So the federal funds, Title I, II, III, and IV, are formula funds. And so they're not competitive. And so what that means is that you qualify for it automatically as long as you meet certain criteria. You don't have to write a grant to compete for it against other people, right? Or other entities, I should say. And so with the Title III application, it lists in there as one of the requirements that you're going to describe how you're going to promote parent, family, community engagement, right? So once again, this is going to be at the district level. So the federal director or the EL coordinator, whoever it is that's in charge of the English learner department, in your educational entity, would then have to write in their Title III application how they're actually going to go about doing that. All right. Now, the important part with this is that in this section here that I just put up, this is also a part of the Title III application, and these are the assurances. And I'm going to start with Part C here because this is related to the previous one, right? And it says that the eligible entity consulted with teachers, researchers, school administrators, parents and family members, community members, public or private entities, and institutions of higher education in developing and implementing such plan, meaning this plan here, your actual application, your local plan, right? So if you go back to the previous one here, where it says, how are you promoting parent, family, community engagement? Well, and then going back to 1112, where it said, that you're going to get feedback. Well, this is where you can see where you can get that feedback. In this assurances piece in here in Part C, the district is saying by having the superintendent signing this, that they've met with these various stakeholders, like parents and family members and community members, in the development and implementation of this Title III plan, right? This application. And so you can see how if you're having the regular meetings and you're consulting with the families and you're having engagement activities, you can then write about your description of how you're having parental activities, and you will also be able to check off that, yes, you did consult and get feedback from parents and family members and community members when it comes to the Title III application, right? Part A up here is also related. It says that, synthesis ties Title III to Title I, and saying that you're ensuring that you're complying with Section 1112. Well, as you know from seeing just a few minutes ago, 1112 has to do with your parent notification letters, has to do with the regular meetings and the parent outreach, right, and the notice and format. So the superintendent signing off saying, okay, yes, we're doing this. We're complying with that Section 1112E, right? And then Part D down here, it says, if applicable, the eligible entity will coordinate activities and share relevant data under the plan with local Head Start and early Head Start agencies, including migrant and seasonal Head Start agencies and other early childhood education providers. This might be an important aspect for you, where you are working with early childhood education, and maybe that's a part of where you might do some family community engagement activities, right? And so this gives you, this is a new part here, Part D, that wasn't in No Child Left Behind. So where you're coordinating those activities and sharing data. And so that's a nice thing that gives you a little bit of leverage if you want to make those connections. All right. And it looks like we've moved on to Rachel's part, where we're going to be covering Migrant with Title I, Part C.
Great. Thanks, Marshall. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Wright-Junio. I am the former Migrant Education Program and Compliance Coordinator. I recently moved within DPI, and I'm now the K-5 ELA consultant. But during the time that we had this scheduled, I was still working under Migrant. So I am still going to be doing the webinar today, but I am going to provide you with the contact information of my colleague who is still working in the migrant department should you have further specific questions related. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about parent family engagement under Title I Part C, which is the part of ESSA that authorizes the migrant education program. For those of you who aren't familiar with the migrant education program, which we abbreviate as MEP, we operate 31 district level programs. So we subgrant out to 31 districts. And then the rest of the districts are covered by a regional recruiter. We have 5 regional recruiters, and I'll show you a map in a few slides so that you have the contact information of those folks. But a lot of times what we've noticed is that our subgrantees that have migrant programs also have large EL populations. And then also I wanted to kind of get the word out for those districts that may not have a migrant program, but may in fact have migrant students. I wanted to kind of pinpoint ways that you could involve those migrant parents within your parent family engagement efforts through Title III or through Title I. So under Title I Part C, there's a couple of requirements for parent and family engagement. So 1304, Section 1304C3 requires all migrant programs, so all subgrantees that have operated for at least 1 year must convene a migrant parent advisory council. So this parent advisory council is supposed to provide feedback and help in planning for migrant program activities, much like what Marshall was talking about for the authorized activities for the local plans for Title III. That parent involvement is required in planning for the local activities for the migrant program, just like it is for Title III funds. The PAC should also be meeting to assist program staff in determining program services and also in eliminating unproductive or unneeded services. And this I want to draw attention to because I think that a lot of times we collect parent feedback, but we aren't necessarily as great at incorporating it, especially when it comes to eliminating unproductive services. So if we get consistent feedback from parents that something we're offering either with migrant funds or Title III funds is not working, we need to take that into consideration and say, okay, what should we do instead? Because a lot of times as practitioners, we think that we know best, but we have to give a lot of credit to the parents that are with their kids day in and day out in order to make sure that we are offering services that best meet the needs of our kids. Also, just like with some of the things that Marshall was talking about in Title III, all of the programs and projects have to follow the same requirements for parent and family engagement that's required in Title I, Part A. So that also includes providing notifications to parents in a language or format that's understandable to them, again, to the extent practicable, which Marshall already mentioned. And that would also include things like involving parents in the district or school PAC and making sure that those parents are also receiving information about school-wide parent engagement activities and initiatives. And that's probably one of the things in federal programs that we run into the most, is that the programs individually do a really good job in involving their parents within those programs, but then they aren't involved in the larger initiatives for the district or school. So that's something that you want to make sure that you're doing, is that you're providing those opportunities for your migrant and your EL families to also engage with the larger school and district parent and family engagement initiatives. You can go to the next slide. So another requirement under the ESSA is that all subgrantees provide for outreach activities. So again, this is not just a part of the law that says this is something you can do with your funds. This is an assurance that if you receive migrant funds, you have to provide for outreach activities to inform families and children of other education, health, nutrition, and social services. And this can be something as simple as serving as a bridge to connect families to these services. Many of our programs provide resource guides for families, make a lot of referrals, but this is something that once you receive a subgrant from the state, you are required to do. Next slide. And then there is a separate section of the law, which is 1304 C7 A and C, which goes further into what can be included with the migrant family outreach. This part of the law says that the programs should conduct advocacy and outreach activities, as well as family literacy programs to the extent feasible. So a lot of times our migrant programs may only have one staff person, so they may not be able to connect families to every single possible service, and the needs of the families may be in different areas. So as long as that program is choosing to connect families with the most needed services, that's what we're looking for. And again, I understand that many of you on this call may not be working in a district with a migrant subgrant, but we are required to identify and serve migrant students even if you do not receive a subgrant, and we do that through the state. So on the next slide, I've put the subgrantee map and the regional recruiter map. So the map on the right side of your screen with the counties in green, these are all the counties that receive a subgrant. So these are the counties that directly receive funding to serve migratory students. The map on the left are the counties that's color-coded with several different colors. This is our regional recruiter map. If your county is in one of the regional recruiter, is covered by a regional recruiter rather, I would encourage you to email that regional recruiter just to establish a point of contact and also get more information about students who may qualify for migrant services, because through the state, we're still required to serve those students. And so there may be some services that your students can benefit from if they are in fact migrant, but maybe you just don't have the point of contact for that person yet. And we are still at the state level, we still involve our migrant parents at a state PAC, because those counties that are not covered by a subgrant have to also have we also have to collect parent input and feedback. So we do that by convening a state parent advisory council twice a year. You can go to the next slide. So I just want to share some best practices for migrant parent advisory councils that you can also transfer over when you are doing meetings with your EL parents. Another common thing we see that I did want to point out is that a lot of times we will have combined EL and migrant PAC meetings. I will say that's allowable, but again, if I have any of my migrant folks on this call, I do want to remind you that while it's allowable, you still have to have a separate time where you are only speaking with migrant parents to collect feedback specifically on the migrant program. But if you have, dual identified migrant and EL parents, and then other EL parents that aren't also identified as migrant, it's fine for you to convene a larger parent meeting to save time. And also not to be requiring parents that could be dual identified in both or students that are dual identified in both programs to have to attend multiple meetings. So some of the best practices for a migrant parent advisory council is to meet at least twice per year, elect officers and facilitate parent leadership. We've seen a lot of districts actually offer leadership training to their parents, which is something that you can do. You can also pay for a parent leadership training. There's some organizations that provide that in multiple languages. Also collect and save artifacts from meetings, including minutes, sign-in sheets, and agendas. If you're involved with federal programs, you know how important documentation is. And so it's really important that you have that documentation to back up what you're doing in your parent advisory councils. And then, like I mentioned before, we want to use parent feedback in a meaningful way. Eliminate those services that parents don't see as useful. Utilize funds to add services that are allowable and that parents need for their children. And I also want to draw your attention to the photo on this slide. You might notice that there's an awesome spread of food. This is like a catered barbecue, local barbecue place at one of the PAC meetings I attended. So a lot of people don't know, and especially if you've been involved with federal programs or are involved with federal programs, with migrant funds, you can use migrant funds to pay for meals for your PAC meeting. So that's a great tool to bring parents in. And that's not something that you can do with Title I funds. So I encourage you, kind of like Marshall said, to look within the law and then like the non-regulatory guidance to see what types of things you can purchase with funds and get creative with utilizing those funds to make sure that you are bringing in the most amount of parents possible to get that feedback to improve your programs. You can go to the next slide. So on this slide, I've included some resources. The first resource are some survey samples. Again, it says Migrant Education Program Parent Survey Samples, but please use these for any of your parents, for your EL parents, you're more than welcome to go in and download these documents and make them your own. They're already translated into Spanish and English. So if you need another language, you could get them translated. But this is, I think there's maybe 10 different surveys for different grade bands for parents, including pre-K. So I would encourage you to explore those and see if they may be useful to you in collecting parent feedback for your particular program. If you have a migrant program, you can use them. If you're just trying to collect feedback for Title III, same thing, you can feel free to use these samples. The other useful resource that I've provided is the second bullet, and it's the Georgia Department of Education Migrant Education PAC Planning Package. This is really comprehensive and again could be used for any population and even for any PAC. The MEP PAC does require bylaws and things like that. So there are some sample bylaws in English and Spanish within the PAC planning package, but there's also things like sample agendas and sample questions to collect feedback and sample icebreaker activities that are culturally responsive. So I would encourage you also to take a look at that, even if you're not MEP or you don't have an MEP program in your district. This is something that's going to be useful for you to engage parents regardless of whether they're migratory parents or not. And then specific for our MEP folks is that I've included Chapter 7 of the non-regulatory guidance, which provides more in-depth details about the Migrant Education Program Parent Advisory Council. Again, this is at the bottom of this slide, you'll see my colleague's information. He is the MEP data coordinator and also the parent family engagement coordinator. And his name is Dr. Heriberto Corral. And if you have other questions about implementing PACs or about MEP eligibility specifically, you can direct your questions to his email. And I'll also drop the link to our website in the chat so that you can also look at eligibility requirements for migratory students, so that you kind of have an idea of, hey, I may have some migrant kids that I need to contact the NCDPI migrant staff about. And now I'm going to turn it back over, I think, to Satli, maybe.
Yes, thank you. So we are going to, if we go to the next slide, we'll see we have some resources that we have collected. And now that you have these reminders of what is the guidance we have at the federal and state level, you will see some of these in practice. And in spring 2019, a group of educators from different areas of the state came together and they created this webinar series that we are sharing. And we're going to see the resources and what you can access. Then we will also talk about the WIDA resources that are specific to parents and how you can reach out and help them understand some of the processes and what we do. And then other resources about the summer conference that you might use, because we also addressed reaching out to parents and how you can help them during remote instruction. So the first resource that we have on the next slide is the webinar series. And you can access, if we go to the next slide, let me see, at least my internet is, okay, there you go. No, one before this one. There you go. So we have, this is a set of webinars and we have the first one, and I would love for you to go and explore. I really encourage you to explore this one if you don't want to watch all of them. The first one, there was Family Engagement Research-Based Frameworks, will give you more details and samples of what are those family engagement frameworks you can put in place. And there are 5 that we discussed in this webinar, but you don't have to use all of them. You don't have to choose one. You can see what is something that you could implement in your district based on your population and your needs. And if you receive either Title III funding or MEP funding, then you can see if some of these strategies that are in these frameworks would be something that you can do. So these are really good resources, research-based. So you can see there is one, the framework that was discussed during the whole webinar. And then at the end of the series, we have another session in which we had the opportunity to help some of the school districts attending how to create their own plan to support their families. Then you will see this. And then between those two, the first and the second webinar, we had some districts sharing different activities and strategies. So Rachel was talking about having these parent meetings where you have some food, you have some different activities, cultural opportunities for parents to participate and be part of those activities. So you will see these kind of opportunities and also connections between the school districts and also higher education and the community college, making those connections between the small businesses and the whole community in the district. So these are practical samples that you can see. You have the information from the different speakers, and then you can contact them and say, hey, I saw this, you were talking about this activity, but I want to learn more about this. They share all the resources they had. They have samples, they have pictures, but if you want to contact them directly and learn more about this, and these might be districts that are close to yours, so maybe you can also contact them, and we have that information as well in each of the webinar recordings. And also if you want to access the links, you have all the resources. And the next slide is about the WIDA resources. And if you can click, Marshall, I hope I don't get all this. If you click on the word resources and we go to the WIDA page, we are going to see, and I wanted to explore this. If you scroll down a little bit, Marshall, after the images, there you go. You will be able to see the different resources that are available, and you can adapt this. You can use, for example, the ABCs of family engagement, and this is what Marshall and Rachel have shared, but how you can help parents understand this. And they also talk about the frameworks and what you can implement so you can reach out to your families and help them be part of your school community. And these are resources that are in different languages. Usually they have Spanish, but there are some of these, for example, when you are talking about explaining to parents, what is it that my student is an English learner that is going to be tested. So there are different resources in the second column that you can see that is explaining the ELL status, what is language testing. So they have these available for us to use. You can use it as it is, or you can adapt it to what you're doing in your district. And there are also some videos that you can access, and then if you have these parent meetings and you can just play this 2-3 minute video and then have conversations and create discussions around this, that will be also a really good activity to have. And now that we're working remotely for some of our districts, or we have had this connection with the families, this has is stronger now, then you can share, for example, on the third column, the family activity packets. And these are in different languages, Arabic, English, Chinese, and Spanish. And these are activities that if you bring these packets for your families, then you can give it to them. And these are activities that the kids might work with their parents. They can do it together. They can be used in a blended format with their L instructor. So there are different resources here that will help you work with your families and make them feel that they can contribute, help them understand that they really contribute to what you're doing in the education of their English learners. So then the last resource, if we go back to our slide deck, is our summer conference materials. We have offered in the past 2 years one specific workshop for family and community engagement, and the last one was how to engage L families during remote learning. So here there are a lot of strategies that you can use, some of the activities that were shared, talk about digital tools for communication with the parents, how to help them during this period of remote instruction. And now that we are transitioning again and we're in this blended, and then some of us coming back to face, you can still use these resources with your families and help not only for the ESL teachers, but also for the content area teachers. So they have the content and they have these other tools that might be helpful and provide more support for families as they help their students. And if you, I'm going to share this one is one resource that I really want you to have, even if you go and then you explore, because I know it's going to be a lot of information now for you to explore. But this specific one is the last summer conference when we offered the how to engage ELK families during remote learning. The website that was created is fantastic, and it has so many resources and practical things that you can just grab one thing and help your families and incorporate it into your plan. So I'm going to share it in the chat. So if you don't get any of the other links, then at least this one, because this one will give you access to the other information and all the different samples. And we have Padlets there with comments and share resources and practical things like, yes, we have all these theories, but what happens when you put it in practice? So it's really valuable and meaningful information that you can really implement right away. And I think this is the last slide for me. And we have a few more minutes. So we are available if you have any questions. We are going to update all the archives, the recording to this session, and the link to the presentation on our Google site. And we have been sharing the link. So that's going to be by the end of this week. We can do it maybe tomorrow morning, but it depends because sometimes the video renders and it takes a little bit to finish and be ready to share. But we're going to share all this information, and you can also find there the information for the other sessions of our series. So we have a few more minutes, Marshall. If you have something or if somebody has a specific questions, we're gonna stay here, and thank you. Please share this as well. If you are one of those school leaders and you have all this information and you have all these districts next to you, if you work together, I think that's really valuable. And as I said, the webinar series was created by coordinators and educators in the field. So it's something that is actually practical and you can use.
That is excellent. I'd like to thank both my colleagues, Rachel Raihunio and Satli Stocks, providing great information today. Hopefully this webinar has been informative and provides you with resources and ideas. And like you said, if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat if you can, or you have our email addresses there, and don't hesitate to contact us. And so do we have any questions out there from anybody?
I don't see any questions. I see thank you. Thank you for this information. But no questions. Thank you. Thank you for sharing these valuable resources. Okay, I don't see any questions on this side. I don't know if you have access to the Q&A, Rachel. I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it on my chat either, so nothing's gone specifically to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, if you would like to go ahead and end the recording.
Okay.